Is Stockholm as expensive as you might have heard? How much does it cost to buy a coffee, to have a dinner out, or to rent an apartment? And can a train from the airport cost more than a fancy dinner in a restaurant? We'll find out in this video. I'm going to talk about average salaries for Stockholm, how much it costs to live here, groceries, coffee places, restaurants, getting around, public transport, you name it. I've been living in Sweden, and actually I've been living in Stockholm for the past 4 years. I'm making this video in September 2020, so the prices are going to reflect what they were in September 2020. And before starting off, I'm going to have a small note on the salaries actually in Stockholm. I already made a video on data science salaries in Stockholm, you can check it out here, but they're not only data scientists and engineers who live here, they're people working in different kinds of industries and different kinds of jobs, so I'm going to try to cover also average salaries in Sweden. I took information from a statistical website that's powered by data from taxpayers, so it's data for everyone who submit their taxes. They might be working in different areas, different industries, different roles, and it's on average for men and women. I'll link the website down below. So for an average person who lives in Stockholm, their income will be approximately 29,000 SEK. After taxes, that converts to 23,000 SEK. That means that 50% of people earn less than 29,000 and 50% of people who live in Stockholm earn more than 29,000. 25% people earn less than 26,000, that is 20,000 SEK after taxes, and 25% of people earn more than 34,000, or actually 35,000, that is 27,000 SEK after taxes. So here you can get approximate ranges of how much would you earn if you're like in a junior role and in the industry that pays a little bit less, and in the senior role. So let's say you move to Stockholm and you landed in the Stockholm Arlanda airport. How do you get to the city? You have several options. First of all, there is a bus that takes you from the airport to the central station that costs 119 SEK, and it takes approximately 45 minutes to an hour depending on the traffic. Then the second option is you can actually use public transport, and that will cost you, I think, like 37 SEK or 40 SEK depending on how you pay, and that will take a little bit more than an hour. And you can also take a very fast option, which is the train from the airport to the city, and that will cost you 300 SEK for 20 minutes. In general, public transport here is pretty widespread and pretty good. SL, the company that handles all the public transport here, covers buses, metro, trams, light rail, and some boats. Pretty much in the city you can get around with only using SL card. That will cost you 930 SEK a month. When I arrived here in Sweden, it was maybe 800, so in 4 years it increased quite a lot. If you don't want to use public transport, you can actually use a bike, which is an option that a lot of people who live in Stockholm go for. There are a lot of bike lanes and it's quite safe to drive in the city. I would say the prices for bikes start from 1,000-ish SEK for a cheap bike that you can find in a secondhand website, to whatever you want, maybe 20,000 SEK, 30,000 SEK for an electric bike in a nice place. There are also still a lot of scooters around in the city, Voi, Bird, Lime, you name it, a few other companies as well. Prices for those are different, but I would say usually for me, when I used Voi, the regular trip for like 20 minutes ended up costing around like 50-60 SEK. Oh, and I forgot to say there is also an option of using a taxi, of course. There's an Uber working and a few other taxi companies. And taxi, for example, from the airport going to the city would cost you like maybe 500 SEK or more depending how far you go. Public transport, yeah, pretty expensive, but also somewhat convenient. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes there is snow on the tracks and then all the trains are cancelled, but yeah, you gotta deal with it. Now let's talk about different kinds of food. Let's start with the coffee places. Swedes really love coffee. It's one of the staples of the Swedish culture, I think. That's the way for Swedes to socialize, apart from alcohol, of course. There are a lot of coffee places, coffee shops, from chain coffee places like Espresso House to a more hipster, one-off, really nice roasted coffee places like Johan and Nyström, for example. Fika is a very important part of the Swedish life. Fika is like having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with a bun, like a cinnamon bun, or with some other pastry. It can cost from 20 SEK for a cup of the brewed coffee, which is the most common one. It's made in a machine that looks like this, and I think I've seen that in every single house of a Swedish person that I've been to. For the brewed coffee or brewed cafe, you can actually get a refill, so you pay for a cup and then you can get a free refill. So for espresso, I think on average you would pay maybe 25-30 sec. For an Americano, like 30-35 sec. For a cappuccino, you can pay between 40 to 50 sec, same like for latte, and even more for different kind of coffee with flavors, syrups, caramel, ice latte, and so on. I have never yet seen a coffee cup costing more than 60 sec, I think, but that's yet to come. You can also get food in the cafes, and I would say it ranges between maybe 30 sec for a very easy light sandwich to 50-60 sec for a more medium sandwich, and starting from 80 sec you can get salads. But you won't be full only from eating sandwiches in coffee shops, so there are of course plenty of places where you can have lunch or dinner or breakfast. I would say most common to go for either brunch on a weekend or lunch during the weekday in the city center where people work, or maybe having a dinner once or a couple times a week. For brunches, there are really few really nice places where either you have the whole brunch package, that would be around 300-400 sec, or you can have separate dishes like avocado toasts and different kinds of pancakes. That would be maybe 150 sec for a dish or more. For lunch, most of the people go to lunch between 12 and 1 during weekdays. Pretty much really everyone in Stockholm who works in the city center just gets out of their offices and starts queuing to get their food. This is pretty amazing, actually. I've never lived in a culture like this where everyone was like, it's 12, it's time to eat, no matter what happens. Almost sacred. Even if you're very busy at work and you have a lot of meetings, people usually block out like this hour for lunch, so you can't book anyone for a meeting during this time. So for lunches in the city center, which is around the central station, I would say the cheapest you can find is having maybe like a salad that you pick yourself for maybe 50-60 sec, to a sandwich for 70-80 sec. But generally prices for lunch when you go and have like a warm dish end up being between 100 and 150 sec, and it can be like a wok or a soup or pasta or pizza or a burger for, let's say, 120 sec approximately. A lot of places have the same food for dinner menu and lunch menu, but lunch menu usually is cheaper. So if you want to go to a nice place and try out their ramen, for example, you might want to choose going there during lunchtime, even though there's a crowd of people, but the prices will be cheaper than for dinner. Speaking about dinner, again, prices can be very different, from a really cheap pizza for like 80 sec or 90 sec to a more expensive place with Michelin stars that can be more than 1,000 sec for dinner. On average, you can eat for like 300 sec for a person for a dish and maybe a non-alcoholic drink. There are of course cheaper food alternatives. There are fast food. There's fast food that's available everywhere in the world, like Burger King and McDonald's, and there are Swedish chains of fast food that I find quite nice. One of them is Max Burger. They have a lot of vegetarian alternatives, which I really appreciate. And then there is also the one that called Sibylla. I've never been there, but people say it's pretty nice. There's also a concept of Swedish pizza. There's different types of pizza that I've never seen anywhere else in the world. First of all, there's a very famous kebab pizza. That's like a hangover food that can go, I guess, for like around 120 sec for a whole pizza. And then there is a pizza that I've never seen anywhere, which is salty pizza with bananas. So like there's bacon or ham and bananas. And if you fancy a drink after dinner, that's where it's gonna get real expensive, because Sweden has a monopoly on selling alcohol. There is a very big markup for all alcoholic drinks. So even if you buy it in a store, it's pretty expensive. But if you go to a bar or cocktail bar or restaurant and drink there, that can really cost you a lot. In the cheapest bars, beer can start from like 30 sec for a pint, or like 500 milliliters of beer, ending up around 70 or 80 or more if you're buying some nice craft beer. A glass of wine will cost you starting from 60 sec, more commonly around like 90 sec or 100 sec, depending on the type of the wine, of course. And then cocktails are really expensive. I don't think there are cocktails that cost less than 70 or 80 sec. On average, usually it's around 115, 120 sec for a cocktail. In a really nice cocktail bars, it can be, I don't know, 170 or 200 sec for a cocktail. So a lot of Swedes retreat to buying alcohol in the stores and then drinking, preparing, and then going to go out already drunk, sort of. Moving on to grocery shopping. Since we just talked about alcohol, there is a government monopoly store chain for selling all alcohol. That's about 3.5% of alcohol contained in the drink. The store is called Systembolaget. It's a place where pretty much everyone goes on Friday evening. Because it doesn't really work on the weekends, it only works half of Saturday, in the morning of the Saturday, but it's closed on Sundays. So usually when you live in Sweden, if you want to have a party or if you know you want to drink on the weekend, you have to plan it ahead and buy your alcohol prior to the occasion. The prices for alcohol are generally higher than other European countries that I've seen. For example, wines are so much more expensive than in Spain or Italy or France. You can check the prices on the website, and as a side note, I really recommend installing the Google Translate extension for the Chrome browser. This is the one I'm using because it will help you to translate the pages. So on the website you can see prices for different kinds of drinks, beers, champagne, wines, and so on. For the food, there are a few chains of supermarkets. There is Coop, Hemshop, Lidl, ICA. I think those are the most common ones. There's some other ones like Willys. If you live in a regular Stockholm neighborhood, you will either have a Coop or an ICA. I usually have Coops around me, and that's where I buy my groceries. People also tend to buy groceries online, for example, at the website called MudSmart. Sometimes I heard that it's cheaper. And there are a few food delivery services which deliver ingredients and a recipe to use, so you can use all the ingredients that are needed for this specific recipe to create dinners for yourself and your family. Oh yeah, and of course there is also Uber Eats and Volt, so that's actually food delivery services that deliver to you ready-made food from different restaurants. I checked my statistics and how much I spend every month for different types of food. Living alone, I spend approximately 1700 SEK for a month for groceries, 1300 SEK for restaurants, and approximately 400 SEK on coffee, which did decrease during the lockdown stage because I didn't drink out that much and didn't eat out that much, but still quite a concerning sum of money. Some of the examples for the food prices: liter of milk will cost you 10 SEK, 1 kilo of potatoes will cost you around 12 SEK, 12 eggs will cost around 30 SEK, a kilo of Swedish cheese will cost 100 SEK approximately, 1 kilo of apples is 30 SEK, 1 kilo of tomatoes is also 30 SEK. Minced meat, for example, I think this is lamb, costs 150 SEK per kilo, and vegetarian alternative for minced meat, also for a kilogram, costs around 65 SEK. I'm really happy actually with Sweden because it's so easy to be vegetarian here. There's always going to be a really nice vegetarian alternative dish in a restaurant. Wherever you go, there's a lot of vegetarian only restaurants. There's a lot of vegetarian alternatives to different kinds of meats or cheeses, vegan cheeses in that case, in the stores that you can buy from. For example, I tend to buy a lot of this soy-based vegetarian minced meats that I use for lasagnas or bolognese, and I've actually never really seen it before when I lived in Russia or in France. Also, if you want to check prices for restaurants or stores, for most of them, if you go like on Google Maps and find their location, you can see that they have a website, and most of them do have menus available, or stores have the list of their products, so you can go yourself, explore what kind of food you're interested in, and see how much it will cost. Now let's move on to the most painful and the most expensive part, which is having a place to live. Rental prices in Stockholm are famous for being super ridiculously high. People are complaining about them all the time. This is like weather. Talking about shitty weather and talking about expensive apartments to rent is two cornerstones of a conversation between people who live in Sweden. You have a few options, of course. You can either buy or rent. Let's start with the rent. First of all, you can rent rooms in apartments. I think it's quite common for students. And for students, there's also a special kind of deal that you can rent rooms in community housing or university housing. I'm not sure how much that costs. I haven't been a student here, so maybe if you are going to study here, research it on your own. Room prices in the city center can range between 3,000-4,000 SEK a month if you want to commute a bit more, to around 8,000 SEK a month if you want to live really close to the city center. The room sizes tend to be between 10 to 15 square meters with a shared bathroom and shared kitchen. Renting your own apartment or renting your own place is the most common way to live here or start off living here when you just move here. Again, depending on your preferences, the quality of life that you would like, prices can range very differently. It's really hard to find a studio that's not more than 30 minutes away from the central station for less than 10,000 SEK a month. Closer to the city, a studio of 30 square meters will cost you more like 12, 13, 14,000 SEK a month. Usually when the ad for an apartment says that it's a one-room apartment, that means a studio, so you will have like a kitchen, living room, bedroom in the same place. When it says 1.5 room, that means that either you will have a Sovalkov, so your bedroom will be a little bit separated from the rest of the apartment, or you will have a little bit separated kitchen. And when it says that you have 2 rooms, that means you will most likely have your bedroom separated from the rest of the living space. So for a 2-bedroom apartment that's around 50 square meters, expect to pay from 12,000 if you're really lucky to maybe 16, 17,000 SEK a month if you want to live closer to the center. It's really a pain to actually find that apartment as well. So it's not like you're gonna have a lot of apartments available for you and you can just pick one. The demand is much higher than supply here. There are some websites where you can check apartment prices for different areas of the city. For example, the most common one to use is Blocket, bostad.blocket.se. You can check for your preference and where you want to live, how much it might cost you to live there. But I would say that just even to rent the apartment, you have to first be very lucky and then be also very fast. When you see something that you like, you have to apply immediately right to the landlord. Usually landlords ask for 1 month of deposit or more than 1 month of deposit in some cases. When you move in, they ask for your references, they ask for your pay slips, for employment contract, for you being non-smoker, have no kids, have no pets. So it's pretty hard. There are hundreds of people applying to the same apartment within the first hours of it being released. So yeah, it's quite hard to find a place to live. It's like a work, pretty much. Another really important point about renting an apartment is that there is a lot of scam. So please be careful. Make sure you get to the place before you sign any papers or send any money. Make sure you find out that the person who wants to rent this apartment for you actually owns the apartment. So you can ask them to show you the purchase agreement of them buying this apartment. You can check if they actually live there on websites like Ratsiv.se. Be careful, really. If you're renting an apartment in Stockholm, be careful. Try not to agree on anything really fast. Although, yeah, to actually get one, you have to be pretty fast. If you don't want to have to deal with the whole mess with the rent, you can buy an apartment in Stockholm. A lot of people retreat to that option if they have enough money for a down payment. Buying an apartment sometimes seems like a better option than renting because you will pay a little bit less with your interest and mortgage repayment. To buy something, you usually need around 15% of the apartment price and down payment, and you can apply for a loan for the rest. I will link down below a mortgage calculator from one of the banks that we have here in Stockholm in Sweden. There are other banks and there are of course other mortgage rates. I would say the interest rate on mortgage tends to be between 1.3% to 1.6, 1.7%. Depending on your salary, how many people are buying an apartment, how much is your down payment, and a lot of other criteria, of course. For the prices for apartments, there are also websites where you can check it out. For example, Hemnet.se. Here you can see what kind of apartment you want, what's the size of the apartment of your preference, which areas you like in Stockholm to live in, and based on that, you'll kind of see the range of starting prices for the apartment. An important point here is that the price that you see on this website is not the final purchase price of the apartment, most likely. The way you buy apartments in Sweden is that you have to bid for them. So the person who wants to sell an apartment, for example, sets up viewing. There are a few people that come to view an apartment and then they start the bidding process. It starts from the price that is listed on the ad for the apartment that you can see on this website. And it can go up to 20 to 30, maybe in some cases to 40% more if it's a really nice apartment and if people really want to buy it. So consider that when you're thinking of how much you should allocate for buying an apartment. If you start with looking for apartments for 2 million SEK, you might easily end up paying 2.5 million for that apartment after the bidding is done. Close to inner city, a small studio, 30 square meters, will cost you 2 million SEK. A little bit further out, you can find a nicer, bigger 2-bedroom or 2-room place for maybe 3.5 million. The prices are very different and depends really on what you're interested in. Now, when you finally have a place to live in, you need to fill it up with stuff. Usually the apartments that you rent come fully furnished, so I usually rent apartments that are furnished because I don't want to bother with buying a lot of furniture and fitting it in different places, especially when I need to move to the next place that I'm going to be living in. But if you don't have furniture in apartments, of course, there's always IKEA. Even though IKEA is really popular here, what I noticed with a lot of my Swedish friends is that they buy a lot of furniture and a lot of like utensils secondhand on the websites like blocket.se or on Facebook Marketplace. So a lot of Swedes are actually looking for like a nice vintage coffee table or a nice secondhand lamp on Blocket or Facebook Marketplace, so that they don't buy necessarily newly produced things. I also use those websites for different needs, like I have a lamp from Blocket, or I bought my bicycle on Blocket as well. So I think it's pretty common to first look for something that you want secondhand and then maybe start looking at places like IKEA. Interest in sustainability and zero waste doesn't stop on secondhand for Swedes. A lot of Swedes also buy clothes from secondhand stores. For example, there's a very big one called Tradera, and there are some offline stores like Stadsmissionen or Beyond Retro where you can go find like a nice leather jacket that maybe someone's grandma or grandpa was wearing, and then get it, fit it in your wardrobe and look like a hipster Swedish person you are. Yeah, that's actually a good point. A lot of Swedes are pretty stylish. People tend to look very similar, like dress very similar. There's like this common idea that everyone wears black, which is not necessarily true, but there's a lot of outerwear that's black, I would say. For clothes and accessories that you don't buy secondhand, there's always H&M or H&M. There's H&M. Sometimes it feels like there's an H&M on every corner. There's so many H&M stores in the city. It's ridiculous. At the central station next to the store called Åhléns, there is a street where there's literally 3 H&M stores on the same corner. So there's one here, and another one here. Of course, there are other brands, but a lot of them are actually owned by H&M. For example, Monkey, other stores, COS, Arket, all of those are from the Hennes Mauritz company, and they're quite popular for Swedes to shop in online or offline. For accessories, you might have heard of Fjällräven and Kanken backpacks, and there's another company that's called Sandqvist. Probably every single of my friends here have one of those two, either one or the other. For example, I'm a Sandqvist person, so I have 2 Sandqvist backpacks, but a few of my friends have Fjällräven. It's quite a little bit like a uniform. Now there's area of different kinds of services that you can get in the city. For example, beauty services, like you can get a haircut from 150 SEK for a guy in a very small barber shop. That's not particularly fancy. To more commonly, it's around 300-400 SEK for a haircut for men, and starting from 500-600 SEK for a haircut for a woman, especially with a long hair. I tend to pay around 800 SEK for a haircut, or more if I want the nice treatment for my hair. So I don't go to the hairstylist that often. That's like an investment that I want to make once a year or twice a year. Massages cost between maybe 400 SEK for half an hour to 600-700 SEK for an hour of full body massage. Manicure, pedicure, also 300 SEK for manicure, maybe without polish, to 600 SEK for pedicure with polish, and it's more if it's gel manicure and pedicure. If you want to repair your bicycle, that's also going to cost you quite a lot. If you want to, I don't know, repair your car, that's gonna cost you even more. The general thing is that everything that's kind of man-made, that requires effort from a person, that's like fixing your bicycle or cutting your hair, is gonna be quite expensive because salaries here for those jobs tend to be higher than maybe in other countries. If you wanna do sports, that's also not particularly cheap. That's why a lot of people run in the forest instead of running on the treadmill. Running on a treadmill in a gym will cost you at least 300 SEK a month, depending on the chain of different gyms. There are many other things that you can still pay money for. I'm trying to think of something. What else can you pay money for? So this was a very brief basic overview of how much different kinds of things cost in Stockholm, food, services, living arrangements, and so on. If you're interested in something very specific, or if there's something that I didn't cover, please leave me a comment in the comment section. I'll try to answer or help you to find out how much that would cost here. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what kind of videos about Sweden you would like to see next, and subscribe to my channel and like the video if you like it. Thank you for your time. Have a nice day.